my chair, James. So we don't need to do a big intro.
Okay.
Because
You already have the intro feed down. It looks pretty good.
nailed. Hey y'all, Mike Rogel here with Organizational Behavior. We are moving into individual characteristics. This lecture and conversation with James Avey will be focused on personality and cultural values.
You're not a bad person.
All right, James,
Yeah.
we're in individual characteristics.
Individual characteristics,
All
yeah.
right, cut me off.
It's all good.
It's not okay. Is that part of your personality?
It sort of is. That's what we're going to get into.
We're going to get into personality and
There's some
traits?
extroversion in there, yeah.
Is there? Okay. Well, let's kick things off. This is all
Okay.
about personality traits and also culture and all sorts of other things that are part of individual characteristics.
Right.
Things I'm assuming that we bring to
We
an
bring in.
organization.
Yep. And we're hired for and fired for. That's right.
Well, let's start off with personality. What
Yeah.
is it, and why is it important in this context? What we're talking through.
Yeah. So a personality, right? It's a cognitive trait, but it comes out behaviorally. You can see extroversion. You can't see how it, the neural pathways firing, but hey, that person over there won't shut up, or that person's in the corner, they want to read a book and they don't want to, and we go, oh, we'll just come out of your shell. A lot of times what we mean is be more like me. But yeah, people are wired different. About 30% of that is genetic. So a lot of tests have been done on this, and you go, oh, well, that person is just like their mom or dad. There's genetic, but there's also environment. So there's kind of in a sense, the rule of thirds. So 30% you're born with, 30% is developed by about age 13. The last 30 is fixed at about age 25. Which means if you're an introvert or extrovert or whatever you are, right, conscientious or not, at age 25, that's pretty much what you're going to be. I did a study once where we did what's called test-retest reliability coefficients, where we tested things over time, and personality was at 0.98, which means almost the exact same score
Came
over
out
time.
over it.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah. So it's pretty well fixed, which is nice. One of the terms that the textbook uses is trait. So sometimes if we're trying to motivate someone, we know it's not going to last forever, right? That's a state, so it ebbs and it flows. A trait is generally fixed. It is the way it is. So personality is really popular in what's called IO psychology, industrial organizational psychology. And they come up with, they're called selection batteries, which are basically big fat personality tests to figure out, well, hey, you're going to go into insurance sales. If you're an introvert and you're not conscientious, this is not going to be a good fit. So that gets into all kinds of like EEO stuff and what you can test. But
For sure.
yeah, so that's kind of the big overview of personality. One more comment, I guess, for the next question, and that is that remember, org behavior is really based in psychology. And so there's been 100 years or more of work in personality and psychology. And so we in OB, we just go, okay, like what's useful?
Hook up to that hitch.
What can we take? What's good? What's not? Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm I've gone through different mechanisms of testing personality
Right.
and traits and other types of things. There's a couple really popular ones.
Yep.
Big Five.
Yep.
And also Myers-Briggs.
Myers-Briggs, yep.
Which one do you want to cover first?
Let's do Big Five. But first, your opening statement. I've gone through a lot of different personality tests. This is where what we call the airport books are just super popular. So if someone's listening, they may go, oh, is he going to talk about, the disc profile?
Yeah.
Is he going to talk about the Enneagram? Like it's just the next trendy thing.
Don't knock the Enneagram.
Right,
I've got some
right.
people watching this
Right,
who are
I know.
big fans of the Enneagram.
So if you love one of those, that's great. But just bear in mind, in 5 years, a new book will come out, and it'll be, it'll predate everything else because they all are the first one and the most important, right, and the best one. And 10 years from now, somebody else will love someone just as much.
And we're not knocking them.
Oh, no.
Like that's
They're self-discovery. They're
building
fun.
self-awareness is great.
Yeah.
But we're not talking about self-awareness.
Nope.
We're talking about things that are
Know what
that could
science.
then go into job performance.
Yeah.
Things that are predictors
Yep.
of job performance at
Yeah.
the very end of the day. The
Right.
things that matter most: task performance, organizational citizenship
Yeah.
or citizenship behavior, and organizational commitment.
Yeah, and I was saying, look how the textbook is set up. There's things in mind here: satisfaction, commitment, performance, right? So what Psych does is say personality can predict what people do. What we want to know is, can personality predict how they perform?
In particular jobs.
In particular jobs. So let's pick on Big Five, for instance. So the history of this all culminated in 1991, which, wow, seems like a long time ago. But in 1991.
I was rocking Keds in
Right,
91.
that's right.
Kids champ can take it. Champ's a shoe made for kids like you.
There was hundreds of personality traits, and these researchers are going, this is dumb. Like you do one on resilience, and someone goes, oh no, that's grit. Someone goes, well, that's hardiness, so that's toughness. So it's like there's a million, whatever our English language could come up with a descriptor, somebody did research on it. So these guys, Barrick and Mount, they basically said, okay, we're gonna get these into categories that we think, so we can actually make some utility out of them.
Right.
They came up with 5 of them. See if I have memorized. There's extroversion, there's conscientiousness, openness to experience, neuroticism. There's another one. I'll not remember it right now for some reason. You're going to have to jump in and inform. Do you remember what it is?
I don't
Okay. Anyway, big 5.
I'm cutting that second.
It's okay. Yeah, big 5 personality traits. There's 2 that predict performance on any job at all. Conscientiousness, and what the text refers to as neuroticism, or the opposite of that is emotional stability.
Yeah.
So those 2 in any job, conscientiousness is the best. This is you dot your I's, you cross your T's, you don't skip steps, you're just detail oriented.
And highly emotional stable.
And highly emotionally stable. Yeah, just think pilot.
Yeah.
So a pilot would do good anywhere.
Nothing phases me.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, got it.
So those 2 of the big 5 are the best, but the other ones predict how well people will do in certain jobs. So extroversion in sales would be one. Someone who is we got this interesting piece in HR where someone who's in the training and developing training content. If you score really high on openness to experience, you tend to do really well at that. You're like, okay, well, this might work, and you're more willing to just be open to new threads, new ideas. So anyway, those are the big 5. The big 5 are what we'd say has some utility. I mean, we can actually use that.
Right.
There's established tests. This person comes in and we go, oh, they're really neurotic. Okay, is that going to work on this job? If it's a pilot, use that example. No, it's not going to work. Right. So moving on from big 5, again, we're talking about traits, things that don't change.
Can I rewind real quick?
Yeah, rewind.
Self-reported data.
Oh yeah.
How
Yeah.
environments that people take it in, how much of that impacts the outcomes of that data?
Yeah,
that
big
you've
time.
seen?
Big time. So we've talked a little bit already about kind of correlation is not causation.
Right.
So you can get a paper published in, let's call it the Journal of Crappy Management. You can get a paper published, but if you're going to be in the high-end journals, it's almost always longitudinal. So meaning we're taking an extroversion test now and now and now. We're looking at it over time. Is the other one, and then experiments. So we randomly assign people to different conditions. We assess their personality. And here's the other thing. This might come up later with integrity tests. Some people are used to seeing those like 10 or 15 item personality tests.
Yeah.
Do you like to hang out with friends, or do you like to read a book? Just
Sometimes.
Right, exactly. And no, they're not very accurate. But on more like regulated tests, more tests that have gone through what's called psychometric analysis, which is like, okay, this one's a good one, has internal validity, has external validity, it's conducted in the right setting, stuff like that. They're kind of hard to fake, and there's also fillers in there. I might ask you about personality, and then I might ask you about your favorite ice cream. I'm trying to like get your mind swaying a little bit. I'll ask you reverse coded questions. So you can design the test to improve some of the validity, but your 10, 20 item test, it's not going to be very useful.
Right.
Yeah.
So when I'm trying to use things like that in hiring, what's your general recommendation for those of you who are going to try to go out and apply some of this stuff in the future?
Yeah. It is one piece of data, and you're making the decision on multiple pieces of data. So if you're working with a solid instrument with people who know how to administer it, it's done over time, etc. If you're working with someone who knows what they're doing, then you can put a little more confidence in it. But it's just a data point.
Yeah.
I wouldn't use it to rule anyone out, and I wouldn't use it to rule anyone in.
For those of you who are taking staffing, at some point in your tenure at CWU, who's administrating the testing? Who's interpreting the testing? all is part of
Oh, the conditions.
How
Absolutely.
important that
Pencil
is.
and paper, online, everything.
all of it
Yep.
impacts. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. That's a really boring field called item response theory. Yeah. The consulting firms will pay you a lot of money for it
Yeah.
because nobody wants to do it. It's really
IRT.
boring. Yeah, IRT. It's what it's called. That's Big Five. That Big Five personality traits.
It's
Okay.
good.
So that one's got a lot of utility. Some other ones you might come across for personality are the Myers-Briggs type indicator.
Right.
I'll just comment on it a little bit. That actually predated the Big Five, and not all the work, but predated the amalgam of it. And it's useful for predicting what people will do, like what they will go into. It does not predict performance on the job, or at least it hasn't predicted performance on the job. So when we think about like predicting satisfaction, commitment, performance, we're like, it's interesting to know kind of where you stand on that. It's interesting for me as a leader, as a manager, to kind of build team chemistry, but it's not going to usually be in an HR process.
I like using it for like team stuff, self-awareness, how we get along together, all that,
Yeah, it's
all
fun.
that fun stuff. Yeah.
Right. Self-discovery.
Oh.
And we live in the most self-absorbed nation and time. Sociologists just raving about it all the time.
Yeah.
Like, who does this? Who reads books about themselves?
Only
Like,
us.
Yeah, we do.
That's good. Okay. So we've Myers-Briggs.
Big Five.
Anything else from a personality standpoint you want to cover before we move on to culture?
Yeah, let's hit. There's a couple that don't fit clean into the Big Five, which again was supposed to be kind of get everything in there. One of them is called affect, positive affect or negative affect. I'll just comment on it for a second. There are tests on it. They're pretty good tests. And what this are is somebody over time tends to be a more positive person, and some people are just more of a negative person.
Yeah.
And you would think, oh, I want to work with a positive person. Well, maybe, but you don't want all of your team like that.
Yeah.
But it does affect team chemistry. It affects culture, decision making, all that kind of stuff. So there's positive affect, negative affect, which are pretty strong traits. Another one is locus of control. Locus of control is like a big one for me personally, and I encourage inner locus of control a lot, even though it's a personality trait and it's hard to fix. Locus of control just means, do you think the world affects you and no matter what you do, you can't change it? Or do you think you can operate on your environment and you can actually change things kind of in the way you want? So,
Extreme spectrums,
yeah,
both
unhealthy, totally unhealthy. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
Extreme spectrum of an outer locus of control, meaning the control is outside of myself. It's called learned helplessness.
I'm a victim.
I'm a victim, learned helpless. No matter what I do, it never works out. Yeah. So why even try? And fatalism is really the philosophy behind that. The other side, yeah. But the other side is just, as you said, is just as freaking crazy to think I'm in charge. I run the world. I listen to one of my favorite kind of philosophers. He starts off every talk with 4 things. He goes, life is hard. You're not that important. You're not in control, and then you die. And everything comes from that. And I'm like, guy's got a point. Just
It's a good way to wake up in the morning.
Right, exactly.
But an unhealthy version of inner locus of control would be, I tell the sun to rise, I tell the wind to blow.
You dominate your environment. Your expectations of yourself are really high. You're going to fail consistently, and eventually you're either going to have to change your mind, which if you're unwilling to do, you'll be working completely alone and failing a lot. Yeah.
And most of us don't fall on the
No.
ends of the spectrum.
No,
Most of us fall in the middle.
If we're in the spectrum, we have a criminal record or we're institutionalized. Like if we're off the
If
far
we're way
outside.
off.
Yeah.
But one of the best coaching points for me when I was really struggling in my first advancement to an executive position was feeling that it was the first time in my life I didn't feel like I was in control of a bunch of stuff, and I started saying a lot a lot of those things.
Yeah.
Oh, I got this, I can't this.
Yeah.
And I had an executive coach come in and say, hey, we need to start changing, rewiring that a little
the
bit.
vernacular, yeah. Yeah, we do that with when we do interventions for PTSD, people who have PTSD with resilience. We go, first thing is when it floods up, you just draw on a T-table, 2 categories, what you can control and what you can't control. And they can list out the what I can't control. And you start asking questions. By the end of the day, that one's pretty full, and then it gives them something to work on.
Right,
So,
for sure.
Cool, locus of control. Bounce on to culture?
Let's do it.
Okay, so big picture, individual differences, what people bring into the workplace. Most people, I think, who are watching this video are going to go into business or organizations within the United States. So the United States has its own kind of dominant cultural norms, but the United States is a really cool place, I think anyway, to work and to think about management because it's super eclectic. You have people from all over the world, right?
Yeah.
In our classrooms, you have people from all over the world. On our team, faculty, everywhere we are. So with that, not only do they bring their personality in, which we've kind of talked through, they also bring their culture in, which is not one of those kind of fixed, this is how we think. Culture's been looked at for a long time, long before globalization and everything. One of the first guys that looked into it was a guy named Gert Hofstede, which is a
Good
funny
old
story.
Gert.
Good old Gert. I actually saw Gert in an elevator. I was a PhD student. Yeah, I was a PhD student down in Atlanta at a conference. I presented some research, and I came in, and they were all little name tags, and I'm like,
That's great.
I didn't say a word, man. No, I was just like, it was like fanboy or whatever. Yeah, it was pretty funny.
Yeah.
So he came up with the first kind of just the idea that, hey, not everybody's the same. Like, cultures are different.
For sure.
And it's one of those things, almost like emotional intelligence, a little bit, where you're like, okay, like I know that, I've seen that, but can we wrap science around it in clear definitions and measurement and hypotheses? And so he did. A guy named Franz Champenars took that a step further, and then probably the latest and greatest, still 15, 20 years old at this point, is called the Globe Studies. Globe stands, the acronym stands for like Global Leadership Organizational Behavior Effectiveness.
That's super convenient.
See how they did that? Yeah, it was good. So Bob House passed away actually a while ago. Great guy, charismatic leadership theory. Wore an eye patch all his life. It's pretty cool. You could always tell him, like in a room. Again, charismatic guy. But he led the Globe Studies, and all three of the things have basically the same idea. People are different on a series of dimensions based on where they're from, and it's not clean, but there's a continuum. Like I'll give you an example on let's say collectivism versus individualism, right? Would we say that every single person who was born and raised in Japan is 100% collectivist? Well, no. Would you say that every single person born in the United States and raised in the United States is 100% individualist? Well, no. But they're more individualists, and in Japan they're more collectivist, right? So it's not a
The bell curve moves.
it's not a bifurcation.
Oh.
It's not a dichotomy, but it is a big fat spectrum, and there are collectivist cultures that tend to fall on the right, and that is when I make a decision, we are making a decision for the best of we versus the typical individualist, right? Which is, I put myself in this category, is I'm making the best decision for me, right? And so like I don't want to hurt other people. There's an ethical component, but ultimately I'm going to advance and I'm going to operate my environment to do what I want.
So why is that important in the context of thinking through individual mechanisms and then thinking through job or performance overall?
Yeah, and usually you get burned on this. So I'll tell a story. I think I may have told earlier, so I hate to tell the same story twice, but we will. This is the guy, if you remember, is an engineer from Vietnam, and I kept just praising him in public over and over and over, and it was really disturbing to him, and he wouldn't even tell me because of another culture dimension called power distance, which we'll get to in a minute. I'm his boss. He's not going to come tell me to stop doing something, but his buddies finally communicated to me. Like, he doesn't want to be called out. It's an insult to be singled out if you're from a collectivist culture, because it's us all together. And if you say, "Oh, Mel, you killed it," now I stand. Whereas I'm from an individualist culture, right? I'm like, "Yes, I did. Thank you very much." So it's almost similar to personality. You have to understand that wiring in the workplace. Otherwise, you think you're doing a good job as a manager, but in this case, you have a highly collectivistic person. I was not aware of the culture, or even of the concept.
Right.
And so it upset him.
Sometimes you might have been trained that way within Boeing.
100%.
Potentially.
Yeah.
Because that's the way Boeing does things. Boeing
Right.
has their organizational culture.
Yep.
But everybody brings their own individual
Yep.
stuff, and sometimes that
Yeah.
clashes with.
And then that reminds me, the second one, power distance. I had I guess he was a boss's boss who was from South Korea. And the guy's name was Song Lee. It's pronounced S-A-N-G, Song Lee. And if you called him Sang, he wouldn't respond to you. But even if you called him Song, he wouldn't respond to you because you don't call him anything. You don't talk to him. You could feel the power distance from him. I mean, like, walking down the hallway, just wouldn't acknowledge your existence. Now, very paternalistic leadership.
Yeah.
Like, he would care for everybody really well.
For sure.
But like you don't come and you don't address me directly. Like, who do you think you are?
Right.
So fast forward a few years. I, of course, said hi to him, and he just looked at me, and I'm like, well, I'm fired. Fast forward a few years. I'm teaching about 30 people, pilots for Vietnam Airlines, this class, organizational behavior. And I was like, what do you do if you have a problem? Like, I'm working through decision making. Who do you go talk to? And they kind of look at me like, I go, so you go to your director, you knock on the door, you're like, hey, like this needs to change. And they're just staring at me. And I'm thinking maybe it's a language barrier, I'm speaking too fast, something. And I go, well, let me back up. If I had a problem here at the university, I just knock on the dean's door and I'd be like, hey, like here's what's going on, here's what needs to change, take into consideration. And just the look of dread on their face. They're like,
You don't do that.
how dare you? Like who do you think you are? But of course they couldn't say it because I'm their superior.
Right.
So they couldn't even say it. I'm
Sounds like a
oh
very-
man, it was a disaster.
It's a no-win.
So a big idea if you are supervising a group that may have higher levels of power distance,
Right.
even in the United States, there's
Mexico.
oh for sure yeah. But there's there's also the idea of if you have like a heavy-handed parent or two, and you never question them, right? If you do, you get in trouble. It's just not part of your family culture. That could even kind of come in. But if you have that in your group, they won't tell you what's wrong.
Right.
And so you've got to basically create this thing called psychological safety and trust, and kind of mine it out with respect slowly. Because you may go, okay, is everybody good here? And everyone goes, yeah. Well, I can tell you right now, everybody is not good.
Right.
But it's inappropriate to cross that line.
Considering people lots of people have a diverse background, you're probably going to be managing people with diverse backgrounds. What's your best bit of advice for managers as they approach, a team of 20
Yeah.
from all over the globe?
I like social network analysis, and I like the concept of being a student of your team. So I'll hit them briefly. Student of your team, I think, is pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
Like, how is this when I do X? How does this person respond? How does the person next to them respond, etc. So you can kind of get an idea of this is like equity versus equality, right? The whole I'm going to be firm, fair, and consistent. It doesn't work. So you have to study and figure out what their needs are and meet them if you can. I like social networks analysis. A guy named Daniel Brass did a lot of work on it in the early 2000s, and it has to do like each person is a node, and there's network centrality, meaning someone is connected to a whole bunch of other people. There's network density, how close that group is, frequency of communication, and when you map it out, if you just Google social network analysis map, it's hilarious. I mean, you get clusters, and you get, oh, well, this person actually joins these two clusters. So if you can understand that a little bit, study it a little bit, you can go, okay, if I can win Mike over, I can win Sally and Bob over too, right? So I'm going to invest, and people go, well, isn't that kind of favoritism? Yeah, it's called LMX. It's a really helpful leadership theory in groups and out groups. If you can, because it operates on the principle of borrowed trust. If somebody else who we didn't know walked in here right now and you're talking to them and it's a good conversation, I like them. I know them. I trust them because you do. Same principle applies at work. That's what I do.
Radical. Anything else you want to hit on culture or?
Last one. Yeah, one last one. Social cognitive theory. There's person, behavior, environment,
Just
right?
FYI, students have been hitting that hard.
Perfect.
And literally.
Drawing. So they're all connected. Personality will be affected by the environment. So it's called situational strength. I don't care if you're an extrovert. When you're in boot camp, you're going to shut up.
Yeah.
It's a very strong situation. So in those weaker situations where the social cues are less, so like scripts that we do, right? Like the shake hand thing, like all that. When it's less clear, then personality comes out. But if it's really clear, that can squash personality. That's it.
Cool.
Right on.
All right. Personality and culture.
Chapter 9. Peace out.
Peace.